did you do as a child?
I did commercials and I did a lot of summer stock and musicals. I never went to Broadway, and I wasn't a child for very long because I was heavy and I had a deep voice, and I was like born 40. I looked older, so I was always competing for roles with like mature actors, and
Yeah.
I never could play kids parts, and unless it was some company that was like really down on their luck and they couldn't cast anybody, and they would say, maybe we can get away with this. Maybe we can put him in as as
No one will know.
the butler.
So
And that happens sometimes.
what was your big break then once you got out of college? I got to think that you got.
Well, in college I had a journalism and a theater degree. I had a yin and a yang because my parents kept pushing me, saying, "Get something that that you a fallback you can make a living on, because newspapers will never go away."
Yeah.
Oh, who knew the short-sighted the internet would be coming?
Wow.
Anyway, so I had both. So I got a job at the Chicago Tribune as a feature writer, covering show business and reviewing things. And I was also acting on the side, doing commercials and stuff up there. And I met Bette Midler in Chicago, who was on Broadway in Fiddler on the Roof, and she came to Chicago to play a nightclub. And I knew her manager, and he asked me to write about her if I liked her. And she was fabulous, so I wrote about her. And she said it was a very funny column. You're a funny writer. And I said, well, you're funny. You should talk more on stage. Got any lines? And that was 50 years ago.
Wow.
And I started working with her. And as a result, as a writer, I got a lot of work. I got a lot of work from people who liked what she was doing, and people who passed through town who I interviewed in Chicago. And after 5 years of that, and after writing things remotely, I came out here to do a television series, a short-lived television series. Her dresser had a brother who started a group called the Manhattan Transfer. And they were, I don't know if you know them, but because they're either people who really know them or people who say, who's that? They were a nostalgia act, and they became a big jazz act, and they became a big global act. But we put them on television. We put their act together, and Bette got her manager, and Bette got Ahmet Ertegun to come down and record them for Atlantic. And I came out here to do the 4-episode Manhattan Transfer summer show, and I stayed.
That was your big thing. Bette Midler, though, even then she was probably huge, right? Like
she was just starting.
All right.
Just starting. She had played the Turkish Bath, and she was doing her first album, actually.
And you've done a lot with her over the years, haven't you?
Yeah, I've done everything pretty much. I mean, I've Midlerized a lot of stuff, and then all the live stuff I've done.
So do you still talk with her and everything?
All the time, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. We just did a thing for her charity in New York because they couldn't do their big spring fundraiser.
Yeah.
She has a charity called the New York Restoration Project that puts green spaces all over New York City and has rebuilt the Central Park Boathouse and the tombs at the cloisters. And it's become a thing in New York, and it's become kind of a pet charity of a lot of Park Avenue types, which makes me laugh a lot because she never was one of those. And so we did a virtual benefit to raise money. It was great because we did a Hollywood Squares, which of course I was on for 6 years and was head writer of. So we assembled a bunch of people to do a Hollywood Squares like hasn't been done. Whoopi and Robert De Niro, Billy Crystal, Jessica Parker, and Matthew Broderick.
Wow.
It was amazing. John McEnroe and Patty Smythe, who were friends of Bette's from school. Their children went to school together.
Wow.
And Caroline Ray and Judy Gold and Tom Bergeron. It was great. It was a fabulous thing. We had a great time. And then we had a remote with Tiffany Haddish showing us how to grow our own vegetables.
She is Tiffany Haddish is something.
Tiffany Haddish is I have to say, I was going to say a piece of work, but she's better than that. I mean, she's really something substantial. I mean, she has that character that she does, but she, as a person raised in the foster system, who learned to kind of make it on her own, is incredibly skilled. I mean, she's a gardener.
Oh,
Where
really?
this happened, that it was all like rooftops in tenements and stuff that she grew things, but she really knows her stuff. I mean, she's quite an amazing person.
Wow. Is she pretty down to earth though? I mean,
Yeah, very, absolutely.
really
Yeah,
cool.
and she's living with Common, which is something I would like to do. But she's living in common with Common. So and he is quite an elegant gent, I have to say. He won an Oscar, and I worked with him on the show because they were doing his number on the show. He wrote a song that was in the movie Selma, and then they're a great couple.
You know what? I'm probably going to get blasted, but I'm not real familiar with Common. I've heard of Common.
You know, he's a rapper. I mean, they started as a hip hopper, and then he kind of spread out. And he's an actor. You've seen him in movies, but you probably just didn't realize it was him.
I see him here. He's a good looking dude.
He's great. He's very good looking.
I imagine he gets some work.
Well, yeah, he was in Battleship. You know, he's in pictures like that. He always plays like, you know, the Black Commander. There's always black. Usually, you know, things have stepped up. Usually, whoever the black character is gets killed off early in the picture, and it's usually the best friend of the hero. And he's elevated that a great deal. He's now like the guy. He's the guy in charge. He's the authority figure. You know, it's funny how movie cliches.
What do you think of the current world of movies right now? With I want to say I drove by a theater here in Hillbillyville that I want to say it was open. Like maybe there was 5 cars there, and I want to say they had open signs, but luckily,
you know, there are. I mean, I look at the box office every week, which, you know, there has been none since March 12th, but there are a handful of theaters that are open, and they're showing old movies. And I don't mean like, you know, the Maltese Falcon. They're not showing old movies, but they're showing us Star Wars. You know, the last 3 Star Wars movies, something like that. And they're doing a handful of business. People people have a need to go to the movies. You know, it's kind of like,
so
it's been in our culture. Well, you know, the reason movie theaters haven't died away before the pandemic is because they fulfill a social function. You know, people always want to go and be scared in a big dark room with strangers, and they can scream and carry on because they don't have any of the props that they would have at home around them to comfort them. So they can totally in the moment. People love that. People love to go and cry, you know, and because again, they feel like they're in a safe space where they can let their emotions go. And people like to date. It's a great place for, you know, people, you know, to get your date hot and bothered, so you can work out after the show.
It's always interesting to when people go on dates at movies because you can't talk. Which
but you can't talk, but you are close, and it's dark.
Yeah.
And so, you know, comes a love scene, you can make a move.
Hey, now we're talking. This has been Movie Going Tips with Bruce.
Baby. With Minneapolis, your local drag queen.
I'm telling you, we you've done some stand-up comedy, right? Like, have you ever toured and all that?
I do sit-down comedy. I mean, I tell stories. I'm not a club comic. So I play places like theaters and colleges and places where they're coming to see me. They're not going to Yuck Yucks to see comic number 43 get up and talk about Asian drivers, although you can't do that anymore.
No,
that was what those clubs were like, and so I've done a couple of those just to see how they would go, and I don't have to do anymore. It's not what I do. But I've been in Minneapolis. I did Hairspray in Minneapolis. I was Edna Turnblad at the Orpheum Theater for 3 weeks some years ago, and I've been up there to see shows that the Guthrie friends of mine have been in. And,
I was just
yeah, we shot a special at the Northrop in is it Northrop? Is that the order? Yeah. We shot an HBO show there called Art or Bust.
Oh, well, and I
40 years ago. Pardon me. I talk about it like we did it yesterday. It was 1983.
You worked for how do you remember that stuff? I was just
I
listening.
don't know, but I think because I keep adding Schwarzkopf 23, and that increases the memory. I don't know. I'm just lucky I have it, and I'm trying to count to get it all down in a book before it all goes away.
That's the secret, huh?
Well, I also kept journals. I mean, I had every night I would write something, so I would know where I was and what I did.
because you started what in, I'm looking at your IMDb here, back in 76.
I moved out here in 75 with the transfer. I did some stuff before that, which is probably not on IMDb, and I've been here ever since.
Man.
And I had an agent once who said, you can get rid of the last page of your credits because it makes you too old. Because
Oh,
ageism is the thing.
oh, I'm sure.
And my manager kept saying to me, "Oh, you're iconic.
Yeah. So
Don't worry about it. It didn't bother Rodney Dangerfield. It shouldn't bother you."
did you ever meet Rodney?
I worked with Rodney. Yeah,
Oh,
wrote for Rodney.
tell me, what was that?
Well, he would show up. He'd come to a meeting. He would drive up in his Cadillac, get out of the car in his bathrobe and carpet slippers, and come into the office and sit there with the bathrobe open. And he was hilarious. I mean, he was a genuine guy. I mean, he was unlike a lot of people in the business. He was genuinely giving. I mean, when he got big and opened the clubs, he always showcased new people. He showcased Roseanne before anybody did, and Jerry Seinfeld. A lot of those people started at Dangerfield's.
Yeah.
They were their earliest gigs. So he was really and he wasn't like an absentee landlord. He was there, and he was working with you, and he was encouraging you. So he was the real deal. He was genuinely eccentric, and he enjoyed a cocktail. But,
was he always on? Like always?
no, it's interesting you ask, because a lot of those guys who have extreme stage personas have to do them in public because they're expecting it. People are expecting it, but that's not who they really are. And in the course of an evening with Rickles or with Jackie Mason or with Dangerfield, you'll be sitting at dinner and they'll be talking, they'll be saying, and that's what I think, the problem with Vietnam was isn't that, and then somebody will come over and say, "Oh, Mr. Dangerfield," and they'll say, "I don't, what do you want from me? I don't get no respect." Suddenly we go into the character,
Yeah.
and it's good to see. It's good to know, and that's why they tend to say all comics have a dark side, and because what they mean is when they're their real selves, they can express their real feelings, as opposed to the ones that they have adopted for their professional personality.
Sure. Well, and I don't know. Rodney's just a legend. It's really cool. I'm looking at your you've met everybody. Barry Manilow special? Come on.
Well, Barry was Bette's piano player when we started. Barry was actually Barry's first gig was the first night at the Continental Baths, which was a gay bathhouse. It was just a long story, but there was a nightclub next door, and the plumbing was mixed up with it. It was in one very old building, and so they threw in the nightclub to the gay bathhouse. So the guy who ran the gay bathhouse said, "Go through this door and there's a nightclub." And of course it was 123 degrees in there, but that was why he got it, because they couldn't fix the plumbing. So everybody would sit in towels and people would perform, and Bette was performing there, but her piano player came down with mono. Remember mono? It was a quaint little disease compared to what's going on now. Mononucleosis. And he gave her Barry's number, and she had rehearsed once with Barry or for an audition, so she knew him. And Barry came down like in a flash and played the opening night show, and looked around at all these guys in towels, was like, "What's going on?" Of course, he really knew, but he was under deep cover then.
Yeah.
It took him a long time to come out.
A long time, wasn't he?
He was out. He was what? He was in the closet forever, because this is America, and when you sing a love song, people want to know who you're singing it to. And so he stayed in the closet. Johnny Mathis stayed in the closet for 150 years because we weren't prepared for that. All the pop singers who came out were British, George Michael, Elton John.
Yeah.
Because it was different. It's different there, and here it's much churchier. And
That's
so
interesting because you think it would.
I mean, obviously it changed. So Barry played on her first album and produced some of it, and so he was when he transitioned. He had a record deal on the bubble when I met him, and when he got the deal and he had to go out and tour his first record, we put his act together, his first act, and then Mandy happened off that first album, and suddenly he was a star.
Wow.
Suddenly he went from playing 100-seat clubs to playing 6,000-seat arenas. It was massive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. And then you jumped into the Brady Bunch?
Yes, well, one does what one must. I came out here. The Transfer was a very hip act, and I had a lot. Yeah, I had a lot of. We had great reviews and no numbers, and people say, "Oh, Bette Midler and Manhattan Transfer," and I at that time was writing for Richard Pryor and George Carlin and
Oh shit.
Lily Tomlin and a lot of very hip people, and so people said, no, he's. I couldn't get work, in Variety. They said, well, he's too hip for us. He's just gonna, he's not gonna get our rhythm. And so Florence Henderson was a friend of mine from Broadway. She was a Broadway actress, and she was out here because she'd married a guy who was one of the Shubert organization guys, and they opened a Shubert Theater in LA, and he came to run it. And so she was out here with him and their 4 kids, and they came to her with the Brady Bunch, and she didn't know if it was what would happen, or but she always had this kind of wholesome image. She never let on to how hip she really was, and so she took the job, and who knew it would turn into the Brady Bunch. So when the Brady Bunch Variety Hour was born, she said, "Come write the Brady Bunch. No one will ever say you're hip again." And she was right.
Yeah.
I went and I did the Brady Bunch, and that led to everything else. And the Brady Bunch was only like 9 episodes.
Wow. And it was
it lives because of the internet, like everything else. All the things that you thought you were buried and were gone forever resurface like zombies. They come out of the ground, the internet, and they just never go away.
Yeah, I could only imagine. I see on here that you the Cheech Show. Did you work with Cheech Marin?
Yes, I love him. Cheech and I, we had the same lawyer, actually. And so when Tommy Chong retired, sort of, to smoke dope and do whatever he did, I think he was growing, Cheech was on his own, and we sold a show to NBC where he was Cheech. He was a character named Cheech from East LA, and he was a gardener. And he would go into Bel Air and Beverly Hills and work with these stars, and there would be a guest star on each episode.
Did it ever come out?
We shot 3 episodes: Willie Nelson, Jackie Harry, and we were about to shoot the 3rd one. We didn't shoot the 3rd one, I don't think. And the Writers Guild went on strike, and the network canceled the show, and that was that.
The Cheech Show. And
it was great, and I got to be in drag for professionally for the first time on television. I was a regular. I was a character, a gossip columnist named Luella Fella.
Luella Fella,
who actually was a trans character, and but we never developed it. And I never make a big deal about it. Because with trans people, I was the first trans character. Excuse me so much.
Yeah,
but nobody got to say. Actually, we had the first 2 episodes of the show. We got huge numbers. We had great ratings.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had great, but we couldn't deliver any more shows, and so they canceled it. And it was this was a strike that ran on for 6 or 8 months. I forget.
Yeah,
I've been involved in 7 Writers Guild strikes, and you never win.
No.
You never win.
And I see on here, did you work with Elvis?
No, I never worked with Elvis. I met Elvis, but I never worked with him. I did an Elvis tribute special in Memphis, in the Pyramid. It was sometime when Lisa Marie was married to Michael Jackson. That's when it happened. It was during that period.
Did you work with her then?
I worked with her on the show, yeah. But Priscilla, her mother, was it was a very weird thing because my understanding was Priscilla in the divorce got a payout, and Lisa inherited the ownership of everything Elvis.
Yep.
So essentially, Priscilla went to work for Lisa.
Yeah. Well, and they both seem like they might come with baggage.
Well,
I don't know how
well, Lisa was a Scientologist, which was what Michael Jackson, the wedding, that marriage was all about. It was a Scientologist wanting to control the Elvis catalog as well as Michael's catalog, and Michael had owned a lot of the Beatles music.
Yeah.
So that was what that was. But anyway, it resulted in this Elvis tribute special. I don't know what we were saluting.
Could have been
What event it was hinged on? Because do you know? Does it say what year it was? Because
94.
94. I don't know. Well, he'd been dead for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So I don't know what it was that we were celebrating, but it was a great show.
Yeah.
It was I forget who was on it. I remember Stamos because I flew with him. We flew back and forth. Melissa Etheridge was on it, and a lot of terrific people, and I had a great time doing it. And,
What did you think of Richard Pryor?
Well, he was wonderful, sweet, and gentle, and then he would do some drugs and go out of his mind, and I would kind of retreat at that point. But he was brilliant and intuitive, and a very, very sweet and humble guy.
Yeah.
And insanely funny. But he had world-class demons. And I mean, I wrote for him for television. He wrote for himself, but there were people who wrote. Paul Mooney was a guy who wrote a lot of stuff for him, who was a comic in his own right. And Marsha Warfield, who was on the show with him, who's still around. But I was very fond of him.
Everybody has good things to say about him, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, he was not always a guy running down the street on fire. That's not who he was every night at 11. That was an exceptional thing, but he was loaded, and he was crazy at times.
So tell me now, you were what did you do on this Sandler movie, Zohan? Were you in that?
Yes, I'm in the last scene. Have you seen the movie?
Oh gosh,
Are you an Adam Sandler fan?
Happy Gilmore.
Pardon me. Well, the Zohan is an Israeli, like.
Wait, is that Adam Sandler? That's not Happy Gilmore. That's.
Yeah, no, it's Happy Gilmore.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah, that one, and then there's one other one I like, but Dodgeball's good.
Is he in that?
No,
Happy Gilmore and the Buddy Madison, something I forget.
Hey, speaking.
He's done a lot of big movies, but in the Zohan, he plays an Israeli who's like a Secret Service agent from the Mossad, who's a hairdresser in Queens, and the KKK is after him, and the head of the KKK is Dave Matthews of the Dave Matthews Band.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and because they're great friends, and he wanted to act. In the last sequence, there's something about beagle puppies that have the message or something in the chip and whatever. So there's an explosion, and Dave Matthews and this cage full of beagle puppies that he's got are blown into the Greenwich Village apartment of me and George Takei. We are a gay couple, of course, and we're on the couch watching TV, and the puppies and Dave Matthews arrive between us. And we're just excited that this hot guy with these beagle puppies has, suddenly appeared. And oh my God, you have beagles. Barry Manilow has beagles, and he does. And that's all it is. It's one scene. It's about a minute, and they paid us it was a reshoot. They were reshooting the ending. And so we went down. He was shooting another movie on the other stage, a picture called Bedtime Stories, and with the same director, I think, with Vince Van Patten or Jimmy Van Patten or one of the Van Patten kids. No, it wasn't him. It was somebody else. Never mind.
You just acted. You didn't write or anything.
Did what?
You didn't do any writing on that or anything? You just act.
I wrote our scene with me and George, but nobody will remember it. I remember the movie for Lainie Kazan's Tush, which she later told me was a double.
Oh,
I can show my tuchus on the screen.
So now tell me about how this whole Hollywood Squares thing came together. It's such an iconic show that, I mean, how many?
Well, it never really gone away. Kind of like the Brady Bunch, it was always lingering in the air. It was on NBC for 14 years, and then it went off, and then it came back. Yeah, it came back a few years later, after Paul Lynde had died. It came back with Joan Rivers as a syndicated show, and John Davidson hosting it. And then that was in the 80s, and then in the late 90s, King World decided that they should revive it again. And the producers were the people who had produced Comic Relief, Pat Lee and Bill Moffat, John Moffat, and they asked me to be the head writer. And then they shopped around for a star, and Whoopi got the center square.
Okay.
And Whoopi said, well, Vilanch should host the show. So they thought she was nuts, but they didn't want to piss her off that early. So they tested me.
Yeah.
This is for the win, Kevin. And they said, well, you're not exactly mainstream, but we'd like to put you in a square. So they put me in a square next to Whoopi.
Okay.
And I think they thought I would tame her, but they didn't realize I had been writing for Whoopi for years before that. And they didn't realize that she is really a Jewish man and I am really a black woman. Ask anybody who has slept with me, they will tell you. And so we had a great time in our squares, and we kind of set the tone for the show, which was what people loved about Hollywood Squares was it was watching these 9 celebrities play with each other,
right,
and have be like off duty, and so we were a big hit when we came back on, and I was suddenly a famous person because I was on television every night of the week, and what killed it was Who Wants to Be a Millionaire became the #1 show on television. And so King World, which is now defunct, decided to make us more of a game show. And nobody tuned in to watch people win on Hollywood Squares.
Right.
Because it wasn't big money, and they elevated it to bigger money and big prizes and tried to make it competitive, and that kind of killed the flavor of it. And so it and eventually got canceled. But meanwhile, as a result, I was asked to do a whole lot of stuff, and I was approached on Hairspray, and I toured for 2 years, and I toured for a year and went on Broadway for a year, and I wrote a book, and so I became like a celebrity.
How do you like that live Broadway? Got to kill it every night.
It's the greatest. It touches an OCD button that you didn't know you had, or I didn't know I had.
Yeah.
And, I like getting out there every night and doing the show and seeing what the audience made of it, because some of them came to party and some of them were judgmental, and it was fun, But Hairspray is a big old up. From the moment it starts, it's a fabulous ride, and it's jovial and high spirited. If I were Vanessa Redgrave and I did Medea, and I had to kill my children and drag the corpses around the stage 8 times a week, I might be a darker person. But it was fun to get up and drag and iron, and she had a metamorphosis. She starts as a real slob and winds up as this glamour puss. So I had a squad that jumped me every time I came off stage. So being on stage was easier than being off stage.
Wow. That's cool. Is that the only one you've done on Broadway?
That's the only one I've done on Broadway. Yeah. I've done a lot of other places, but on Broadway, there've been. I almost went back a few times, but things didn't happen. But that's show business.
Yeah, right. What are you working on now? What's the latest?
Well, I wrote I'm sitting here. I'm zooming and streaming, and everything you do now. Nice thing about this, a writer in a pandemic is a writer can write. An actor can't really act, and a director can't really direct, but a writer can write. So I'm writing the book. I wrote a musical with a collaborator that we're actually sold. It's going to be done next. Well, if there's ever theater again in this century, It's going to be done allegedly next spring in Florida, and then we'll see what happens to it. And I'm writing something, a thing that for Netflix, which may or may not happen. And
Yeah.
One of those sort of it's a mini series, one of those 8 series things, which if it works, it will never be Tiger King.
Yeah.
It's not a reality. It's partial reality. It's based on a real thing, but it's not. It's not.
Write that and put it together and then go to them, or do they come to you? How does that work?
We went to them.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing about Netflix is they're the network of the shiny object, because they have to drop something every week to keep stoking the machine. Because especially now, people are home and they're 24/7 Netflixing, and the other titans have caught on. So now there's Peacock and Disney Plus and Amazon and all that. So they've got competition. All of that being said, they released a statement this morning talking about how their 2020 so far has been 10 times what their 2019 was.
Right. I was just going to look.
But that is fueled by new product. That when you drop 8 episodes on people on a Friday, on Monday they're saying, "What else you got?"
Well, and I think it's also fueled by, our low our unemployment numbers being at an all-time.
Well, yeah, of course, people being at home. But the point is, there is a tremendous hunger over there for product, and they have a lot of money, so they can spend the money on the product.
Well,
so I took advantage of that.
I watch a lot of podcasts on YouTube.
Yeah.
And YouTube and Netflix are kind of, what else you need at this point. But I have trouble though.
Porn.
Well, that's true.
Porn. I'm falling in love. I go all over again with porn stars long dead. It's a nostalgia trip. I'm an older bride.
Right.
It's a nostalgia trip for me.
Well, I didn't think of that. That's a good point. I think, YouTube's starting to slide commercials in, and obviously have the membership with Netflix, but the numbers they were talking about were ridiculous this morning. I don't remember what they were, but
what's interesting to me right this minute is Peacock, because Peacock has addressed what you're talking about. Peacock is NBC Universal's stream. I see you're typing. It's fueled by a lot of NBC reruns and stuff. Everything but Friends, which is exclusive someplace else. But they have 3 tiers of membership. You can get it for free if you're willing to put up with commercials.
Right.
So it's like basic cable and premium cable. They've adopted that to the streaming system. So they give you the option. You can get it free, or you can get it with limited commercials, or you can get it with no commercials.
Wasn't that what Hulu does?
Premium. I'm not aware. I do that? I didn't realize that.
I think
I bought Hulu early, and when they only had the one option. So I get it with no commercials. But I know when I go to get the nails did, I've noticed that they have Hulu on all the time, and there are commercials on.
They do. I think actually, if I wasn't so cheap, I could upgrade my YouTube account and not watch commercials too. But
that's true. I mean, I have basic YouTube. I've never really explored YouTube.
$12. I'm not spending $12. I'll watch it.
Well, I mean, they're making a lot of money off of me, because they put everything if you appear anywhere and there's a camera recording you, it shows up on YouTube.
Yeah. Well, and I know with my podcast, I put stuff up on there. Usually we just do the audio, but then like this, I'll put this up because we're doing the video. But boy, if you have any second of any song or anything, boom, they pick up on that like in a second. Yeah. Crazy.
I mean, and I've used that. I mean, I've gone to see things on YouTube. So, but I haven't paid because I haven't upgraded to whatever you would get if you upgrade on YouTube. I don't know. I can't speak to it.
So you keep bringing up this book. Are you in the middle of a book write or what?
I am actually. I'm writing a book about how I wrote the worst television shows in history and lived.
And lived.
The Brady Bunch is among the collection.
Which ones don't I know about? Like what?
Well, you probably don't know the Star Wars Holiday Special, which is famous, and the Paul Lynde Halloween Special, which is famous. These are cult items, and they again are among the things that I did, and I assumed were dead and buried, and the internet unearthed all of them.
Yeah.
You,
Well,
you
that's
can't you can't escape. And every time there's a reiteration of something that it's based on, every time there's a Brady Bunch movie or any Brady, I just did the very Brady renovation show on HG where they bought the house and they turned it into the Brady house, and I was on it. Every time that happens, all of the other stuff I did comes bubbling forth. And same with Star Wars. Every time George does a new Star Wars picture, somebody irately starts in on the screed about the Star Wars holiday special. He's done his level best to destroy.
Are you getting any residuals on those?
No, no, it was 40 years ago. So those, sadly, they run out, or they come down to pennies, where it costs more to cash them. The stamp costs more than you're actually getting from the check. And the imp of the perverse says, let me fuck up their books. Let me not cash this check for 19 cents.
We'll just hold it. What was it like working on the comic relief stuff?
It was fabulous. We did 12 years of it, and at the beginning, it was very noble because thanks to Ronald Reagan, there were homeless people on the streets all of a sudden because he dismantled the welfare system.
Yeah.
While he was the great communicator, and so the comics responded by doing this thing, and HBO was also looking for a signature special for them at the time, so it meshed well. And of course, we made a lot of money and a lot of homeless people were helped, but the problem didn't go away. The problem continued getting worse under subsequent administrations. And a lot of other stuff happened. And, a fatigue sets in. People get tired of, oh, you mean you haven't cured that yet?
Yeah, right.
You're doing another one of these things? So the last one we did was for Katrina. And we did it in New Orleans and Las Vegas, actually. And then Billy, Robin, and Whoopi said, we're done with this. If you want to bring it back, you should have 3 younger people hosting it, younger comics, and we will make an appearance, thinking that might save it.
Yeah.
But HBO, the guy at HBO who had greenlit it originally left, and HBO wasn't in the mood to keep it going because it was a sliding scale. Eventually it's diminishing returns.
But it raised a lot of money, didn't it?
Oh, it raised hundreds of millions. Yeah, it raised a lot of money, and it was the kind of thing that was, even though, especially when the internet came in, it was available all the time. So comicrelief.org could continue putting stuff out there and getting money in. So money was coming in all the time. It was a good thing.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun because it was all of these comics carrying on. Really having a good time with each other, and everybody. Comics are always there to score, but everybody was happy to be there, and they were all coming up with material that was for this particular occasion. So it was fun to work on and fun to watch people do what they did.
Did you?
And it was one of those rare moments where it wasn't wildly competitive, which it usually is.
Well, and there's some big hitters on there. Billy Crystal and Robin Williams, is it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Robin Williams, it was. Yeah.
I've heard of him. He's another one that had to be just a trip to be in the same.
He was incredible. He was the sweetest guy, sweet, warm, wonderful, and again, in public he was himself, and then he would be Rockin' Robin when somebody would approach because that was required. And he had a lot of demons. He had a lot of drug problems, and he had overcome a lot of that. And then he got legitimately sick.
Yeah.
And he couldn't handle being legitimately sick. And then much later, we found out that he had this unusually rare disease, this unusually rare form of depression, of which suicidal impulses are a primary symptom. And it was a thing nobody knew existed.
Yeah.
Until right before he had it, right before it was discovered that he had it. So it was a awful thing.
What a bummer. What do you think of the younger generation of comics? Are they carrying the torch on? I follow a lot of comics pretty closely, and
You do?
a lot of the hot ones right
Who
now.
do you like? Because I never know who to say. But...
Oh, right now I'm on a Bert Kreischer, Sebastian Maniscalco. I'm really a big Pete Corielli guy.
Wow, you know all these guys. I know Sebastian Maniscalco, I know who he is, but
yeah. Well,
I haven't.
The rest of them are kind of and he went from like, his trajectory was just ridiculous. He went from working tables at the Four Seasons to selling out arenas. You're talking in 10 years. I mean,
Yeah.
But the rest of these guys are all.
Dane Cook, the same thing.
Yeah,
because and he may have something in common with Dane Cook in that he's we can swear on this podcast, correct?
Whatever you want.
But they're fuckable.
Yeah.
You find there are very few comics who are fuckable.
Yeah.
And so anybody who kind of puts out that a sexual vibe is going to get a lot of interest.
Yeah.
And so they do. In addition to that, I mean, he's also married with kids, and so a lot of his stuff is relatable to a broader audience than just than a narrow audience.
He does
my audience.
He does a podcast with Pete Corielli, and Pete Corielli writes for a bunch of shows, does a lot of stuff with Kevin James, but I think he's quicker wit. He's a funny dude, where Sebastian's animated.
I think Mulaney is amazing.
Yeah,
I mean, he's my current favorite because he's smart and witty, and there's something. I love oddballs. There's something just off about his view of the world, which appeals to me. And he's also fuckable. So he's so as a result, he fills arenas. He sells out Radio City for a week. I mean, he's.
Yeah. What about a comic relief? Maybe we do some pandemic money and bring a lot of the younger kids along.
Fine. I'm not producing it, but Gigs into hay. Go with God, young man.
Yes, I forgot all about the comic relief thing. That's pretty interesting that you were. Did you do any stand up on it, or did you just produce it and write it?
That I wrote. That was I wrote. There were too many people who do stand up every night.
Yeah. And
who were known. But I did write a lot of stuff for people like we would have someone like Fran Drescher, who now actually has a stand-up act, but then she didn't. Then she was just a nanny. So we had her on. I mean, in her Fran Drescher character, which is kind of like the nanny uptown, the nanny with money.
Is that what she's doing now? Is stand-up?
She put her toe in it. She's not really doing it, but I've seen her do it. She did a few gigs. She's done a few benefits, and then she actually did a few gigs just to see how she liked it. And I don't know that she liked it all that much because she doesn't need to do it, but she's very caught up in Cancer Schmancer, which is her charity, and so she's doing a lot of that. And she's had a couple of series since Cincinnati that haven't worked. One with the gay about a woman who has a gay ex-husband. One was about just the Fran character in another situation. They just haven't worked. So, but I think she's always cooking up something.
That's interesting. Someday I may put my toe in the water. I don't know. I'm not. I don't know. I got too much crap going on right now.
Really?
Well, I think I would like it too much, and I don't have the time to. I got, what do I have? 2 college kids and a 14-year-old, so it's just not in the.
They're exactly you.
Someday when I grow up, maybe I'll dive into that.
Yeah, listen.
Arena.
Rodney didn't start till he was late. I think Rodney said he was 40 when he started, or something like that. I don't know. I forget his story.
You have to have a little life experience. You got something to work with.
Well, I agree, unless you're, really brilliant and a real comic genius, and you can take whatever is happening to you when you're 19 and parlay it into something.
Yeah.
And there are people I've seen, although I couldn't tell you who off the top of my head, who have that. But
Yeah.
I think I agree. You do have to have a little bit of perspective.
Well, I've been keeping a log. I've got a little journal of, I got at least 30 minutes of crap that, I don't know, could just be played with. But all the comedians, like local comedians that I've had on my show, I don't know. That,
Are there places there that where you can work out?
Acme, and then Rick
Yeah.
got the House of Comedy at the Mall of America.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, the thing of it is, if you want to be that kind of a comic, you want to be a club comic, and there's nothing wrong with it, and that's where the big money is if you make it.
Yeah.
You have to work it out somewhere. You have to get up on the stage and be able to just see what happens.
Yeah.
But are you known in the Twin Cities? Are you like a local celeb?
No, not as much as I'd like to be. That's for sure.
Because if you do, you have a head start on anybody else who's in that club.
Oh, for sure.
A portion of the audience would undoubtedly know you.
Well, and we're going to get there. We'll get there eventually. It's interviews like this that are going to blow our numbers through the roof.
Baby.
That's it. No, we've been doing the podcast for about a year and a half, and I do some commercial voiceover work, and then I have a real job that funds this whole train. But it's fun. I have a blast with it. I get to meet cool people and just see what else is going on in the world outside of the flyover state here, and what's the craziness with the pandemic and with everything. Everybody's available all of a sudden, so it's kind of nice.
I know we're all sitting at home, and the nice thing about these is that you ask questions and it dredges up memories and things that I forgot I had, and of course they'll all go in the book.
Oh, when are we releasing this book?
Who knows? I got to write it, and then we got to make a publishing deal. And
what I should have asked is
you're taking up the flood. You're at the very beginning. It's an embryo stage.
I'm working on it. It should write itself. You've been enough places and been involved in a lot of.
I'd pay it if it would write itself. I'd pay it.
Really?
Write it yourself, bitch.
Do that? Can't you just dictate it to someone and they'll write it?
Yeah, but I'm a writer, and so I've never written that way. And there are people who have. Sidney Sheldon, who wrote Other Side of Midnight. And like 20, and he would dictate every day. He would dictate into a tape recorder. Yeah. And then the next day, the assistant would come with the transcript, and he would edit it and redo it that way, and then dictate some more into the tape recorder. And it's done. James Patterson writes an outline, a treatment he calls it, and hands it over to somebody else. That person gets credit now. Every newer James Patterson book has a shared credit.
He's only pumping out like one a week, isn't he? I mean, that guy.
At least, yeah, I think that's probably.
Is that how he does it? He comes up with the concept and the outline and then gives it to another.
But what does Stephen King do? He also pumps them out. He's sitting in that lighthouse just doing nothing but churning out fantasies. He's prolific beyond imagination.
Yeah. Well, some people can do it. I'm not. I can't write.
I know that was just never. I mean, I can write, but I'm not. I'm too social. I'm not going to go isolate myself like a Stephen King character in a cabin so I can get hobbled by the nurse. That's not how I live my life. Some writers really do live a monastic existence.
Yeah.
And they're possessed by their work, and you can't get them away from it. And they produce good stuff. So.
Well, and if it's flowing and it's working, it's great. It's the same thing with it, like podcasts like this. I've had some where you're just like, can we just have a technical difficulty and I'm going to bail out, like there's some, but then it's funny because the ones that you think are going to be the sleepers are the ones that really do well, but when it flows, it flows. So if you're a writer and it's working, why not?
Yeah. I mean, Often, I mean, sometimes I will be on a phone conversation, and we'll get onto a subject, and I'll talk stuff which I realize is I could use as material. And
Yeah.
so once I'm done, I turn it into material. I sit down and actually write it.
You just have
But
books everywhere? Journals?
yes, I have. Well, now it's all, in the cloud.
Oh.
But I had journals. I had handwritten journals, some of which I lost in a flood. But then we found them and like to restore. But yeah, I always have. I've always kept them. And I'm glad I did. Not that they're brilliant or that I would share them, but like Noel Coward's diaries, which I've read, are amazing. I mean, he really, but people did that more in those days. They would sit down and write. I mean, because they grew up in a culture where you wrote letters, and nobody writes letters anymore. They fire off twats, or email, or something like that. So, I mean, I'm one of the few people who will actually write an email that's like a letter.
Whoa.
But as I say, I'm an older bride. I'm from the greatest generation. No, I'm not. I'm a boomer.
I think if I
yes, thank you, boomer. I'm a boomer.
I think if I could go back, and I keep telling my kids this, like the strongest asset you can have is being able to write, so that you could, send an email or pen a letter that, very clear, decisive, and I just can't. It's not my thing. I'd rather talk about it than write it down. Although I do have the notes for, because I think it's good when you come across things that are just like, that's funny, and you got to write it down. Otherwise,
sure.
The old out the memory, gone.
Listen, the real comics who work every night, like Judy Gold. I do a show with Judy. We call it Big and Tall. I'm big and she's tall, and we're both Jewish and we're both gay. So we have an audience that wants to come see us. So we do it periodically, and she is there with the notebook. It is never out of her hand, and she is writing and she is jotting down things and all that. And then before she goes on, she is going through the book and organizing things in her head that she's going to do. And it's, I hand it to her, but that is what she does. That's every night. She is a club comic who does theaters and stuff like that. She also writes plays. She's written a couple of one-woman plays for herself that she's done off Broadway. So
I think there's
and she has a podcast.
Oh, does she really?
What's that been on?
Gold.
It's I forget what it's called. I think it's called Kill Me Now.
Wow.
Kill Me Now. I think it's on Sirius, and I'm not sure. It used to be on Sirius Q. They used to have a gay channel. I don't think they have that anymore. I think she's on Sirius Femme, or I don't know what the hell. I don't get Sirius, so I don't have it. So
I think there's a world where we'll get back to like comedy that isn't racially driven, or where the actors aren't working so hard to be funny. I mean, I struggle with current TV show. I don't watch a lot of network TV, but they used to be good sitcoms and they were funny, but now it seems like they're trying so hard to be funny that it's like everything's got to be a 1 2 1 2 1 2, or it's got to be real racial or whatever, and it's like, can't it just be funny? And you know what I mean? Like, have you noticed that? I guess I should ask, or is that?
Well, I've written a lot of sitcom stuff. I've never been a fan of the form, but it's a nice income producer.
Yeah.
And I find them hard to watch. I mean, a couple of them are really well written. The Connors is really well written. The old Roseanne show. But Roseanne always was the best written show.
When it was Roseanne, or when it was the Connors?
Both. What's amazing is how they've managed to make it so good as the Connors.
I love
and Mom is a really well written show.
I couldn't watch it after they took her off there.
Oh, really?
Well, it just seems dirty, like all those people were really famous because of her and her show, and then she, goes off the rails. And
well, that's the problem. Is they fired her because she's nuts.
Yeah,
and it was the only time they could fire her and not have to pay the penalty.
Yeah.
They exercised it while they could,
Yeah.
because they could see it wasn't going to get any better.
Yeah.
It was just going to be one incident after another, and eventually they were going to have to pull the plug. And they pulled the plug when it would cost them less to pull the plug.
Well, and it's doing okay, right? Like, it's still on. As
It's the ABC's biggest comedy show, and and even as shows go, it anchors the evening at 8 o'clock for what they now call lean back television.
Lean back.
Lean back television is you sit there like in the old days, where you would sit there and tune something in after dinner and stay with that channel. So a good example of the most popular example currently is NBC on Wednesdays, where you lean back and watch Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, and Chicago PD. And the stories tend to flow into each other because Dick Wolf of Law and Order fame has created all of them.
Yeah.
But that's the lean back audience. It's like, let's just see what's happening in Chicago among the first responders tonight. And there you go. And the Connors anchors some comedy stuff that happens on ABC. So I mean, I think when you talk about racial, that's a separate issue because now it'll be difficult to be white and do anything that's perceived as racist. So it'll be whatever the black shows are, or whatever they are at the moment. I mean, now things are like integrated, like The Neighborhood, which is you watch how crazy white people are and how crazy black people are, and that's the gist of the show. Or Bob Hart's Abishola, which is, I think, a very well written show, which is about this standard, this not Archie Bunker, but standard American guy who falls in love with a Nigerian nurse.
Right.
And the culture clash, which is really funny and really well handled, and her people get as much time as his people.
Okay.
It's really, really well done.
I really like him. I should probably give it that one another shot. I just saw part of it. But I rarely watch anything, and if I do, it's something I recorded, and then you miss out on all this other stuff. But I may have to check it out. That's interesting. I thought that all hope was lost on network TV, but some of the stuff coming out on Netflix and whatnot is good. But I don't see a lot of comedy shows on there.
Yeah, there are, but I tend not to watch them. And of course, the trend is towards single camera shows, which are shot like movies.
Yeah,
and they're not like they're not like The Big Bang Theory, which was shot in front of an audience, and they're not like a lot of them on the networks, which are shot like movies and they have laugh tracks, which is bizarre. Like there are people watching this, and there aren't people watching it. There never were, but on the streaming services, I'm trying to think of shows that they have that are like that, but I'm not watching them. So
yeah, no, I it's a different time. I'm right here in Minneapolis. We're in the heart of the shit, and it's ugly. And where they go with the media and the TV, it's just crazy. I mean, we are in a different time. It's going to be interesting to see how this pandemic thing. Did I ask you in the beginning here? Did they shut California back down now?
They are rolled back a bunch of things. It's not totally shut down, but they rolled back indoor dining and beauty salons and things like that because I don't know, the numbers told them that may be where things are happening.
Yeah. Have you been hunkered down, or are you getting out?
I have been. I've been out. I've been out to a couple of socially distanced private dinners, but otherwise, yeah, I have been hunkered down here. I drive around every day just to see what the world looks like, but yeah. I have been hunkered down. I was thinking. I think the first time I was in Minneapolis was when the Mary Tyler Moore Show was on.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it was set in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
And they had used, in the opening credits, they had a house that they had shot. And it was Mary's house where she lived with Rhoda and Phyllis.
Yeah.
And or Phyllis was the landlady, I think. I don't know if she lived there, but Rhoda and Mary each had apartments. And the show was, of course, a huge hit. And a few years after it had been on, they went back to their legal team said, if you want to reshoot anything with that house, we're going to have to ask their permission, because now the house has become identified.
Yeah.
So they asked the permission, and they said no. They said, our life has been made miserable by this.
Uh-huh.
We have people coming up and stealing things and taking pictures and stealing our mail and stealing, all kinds of stuff. And it was owned by a professor at the University of Minnesota. And he was quite vehement about it. And they said, okay, we won't shoot it. And then the network said, we need it. And they said, go shoot it anyway. What's he going to do? Sue us? So they went up there to shoot it, and somebody leaked it to him that they were going to come and they were going to shoot.
Oh, wow.
So the day they showed up with cameras, the house was painted with a huge thing that said, fuck Mary. Mary sucks cock. Mary is a douche. I mean, it was the lewdest graffiti possible. And they couldn't shoot him. And so they wound up paying for the paint job, paying him distress, emotional distress thing. It cost them a lot of money, and they got the shot they wanted. But they had to. They didn't want it anymore, but they had to, because it made them look, and it made Mary look like some kind of a piker. So they paid. And I went to Minneapolis for the Chicago Tribune to cover the story.
Oh, I see. It's funny.
It may not. I think I had relatives in St. Louis Park, but of course,
that's not.
We're dead. Where else would we be?
I've got some property in St. Louis Park.
Yeah. So but I think that was the first time, and then I was there a lot with tours and one thing or another.
I went. I took my boys to Chicago to see Joe Rogan, and on the way down there, we got caught in traffic, and we just happened to veer off. And the Shameless house, the house they filmed Shameless in, was right off the interstate. Like, traffic's not going anywhere. Let's just pop off and go look at it. Not a great area, but they had a little sign on the fence that was like, if you want to take your picture here, that's fine, but leave a donation. And I'm like, well, there you go. And the gentleman across the street who must have been off that day were like, hey, you got a camera? I'll take a picture of you. I'm like, no, we're good. We're going to keep rolling. Not a great area in real world.
I don't even know where it is, but
it's just,
I looked, but it's kind of like generic neighborhood Chicago.
Yeah.
So I never even found out where it was.
Yeah.
There was a house in Beverly Hills up in Benedict Canyon where Raquel Welch lived for years, and she left, and the people who bought it had a plaque installed on a day glow thing installed on the garage door. It said, "She moved."
Well, they took the Brentwood house down for your favorite football star. Someone bought it and just tore it down.
For Orenthal?
Yeah, Orenthal's house is gone.
Orenthal's house is gone.
Yeah, they tore that baby down. It probably changed the neighborhood, because it would have been the same thing. I mean, I drove by it.
Yeah. Well, the Sharon Tate house was taken down. Not only was the Sharon Tate house taken down, but the address was changed.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the address was so heavily publicized that, like on Halloween, they would get like witches and cults that would come and bathe the moon at the foot of the driveway.
Really?
The driveway up to the house. Yeah, I went to that house a few times before the murders, because it was, and after actually too, because it was owned by a friend of mine, Rudy Altobelli, who managed actors and performers.
Well, it's weird that they weren't at home watching the Star Wars Halloween special that you put out.
Well, that was later. That was 78. That was Thanksgiving weekend of 78. I will never forget it. And or 78. And Tate was August of '69. I know that because I was I out here? I was out here shortly after that for something, for a story for the Detroit Free Press.
Hey, you should write a book. I'm just saying.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Well, listen, Bruce, we got to wrap this thing up. I could talk.
All right.
And we're gonna. We might have to revisit. You don't do a regular podcast, do you?
No, I've turned that down. I just didn't. I had enough other stuff to do.
Yeah.
And I've been on everybody's podcast, so it's more fun. More fun catching than pitching in this instance.
Well, we may have to call on you from time to time to get the Hollywood report. And
here I am.
We'll put some polish on this thing and get it out early next week. And
all right.
If you want to check out your stuff, it's just YouTube, or do you have anything you're promoting right now, or you're just
No, but if they want to go to a website, it's called We Got Bruce.
We Got Bruce.
We Got Bruce, because there was a movie called Get Bruce.
Yeah.
It was done 20 years ago with all the people I worked with, and it was produced by Harvey Weinstein, who never laid a hand on me.
Is that good or bad?
Hashtag why not me?
That's a whole nother story.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, all right. Signing off.
All right, Bruce. Thank you.
Out.
We'll talk soon.
Be good. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, man. Bye now.